Hello and welcome to the third of our three-part webinar series on Accounts Payable. Connect your SAP data to business content and processes. My name is Ed Majeska, and with me virtually is Guy Schrader, and we will be your hosts for the next 30 minutes. Our 30-minute agenda is going to cover these topics, and while this webinar is focused on SAP, we will reference SAP throughout. Please recognize that the principles are absolutely applicable to organizations with other non-SAP ERP systems as well. So let's get started with why automate. Today, virtually every organization with SAP recognizes the value of automation by eliminating manual AP processing to gain efficiencies and cost savings. AP departments and shared services are tasked with spending less time chasing paper, improving productivity, doing more with less, increasing visibility and compliance, and improving customer relationships. Now, like many of you, I cringe a little bit referring to the new normal that's coming, not just because it's been an overused term lately, but because it's not coming. It's actually already here. For the past 2 months, we have all been in a new normal. We've deployed teleworkers and are facing business continuity concerns. So instead, I'm going to refer to this as our next normal. These are the important considerations in addition to our old normal that AP will deal with now and into the future, supporting remote workers, securing content, expanding services to customers and vendors, and assuring business continuity now more than ever as a result of 2020 world events. The days of standing still is over. Naviant research and industry statistics find that automating AP typically saves 40 to 60% on operational and administrative costs through process automation, and even up to 80 to 90% with intelligent optical character recognition. So with the value of operational excellence and business continuity at an all-time high, the need for AP automation is clear. But the next big question is how best to do it. And fundamentally, businesses running SAP have two choices when it comes to AP automation. The first of which is install a tool inside of the SAP system, or second option, use a certified tool with data recognition, validation, and workflow that resides outside of your SAP system. Now, integrating a solution that runs AP workflow inside of your SAP system might seem like the most logical approach, but there are some important factors to consider. To begin with, this vision of one company, one ERP system is a myth. It simply doesn't reflect today's reality. A one-to-one relationship in theory sounds great, but business is complex and more companies are global, and mergers and acquisitions are part of everyday life. In fact, it is not unheard of for a company to have as many as 5 ERP systems in use across its global enterprise. In fact, some companies run multiple instances of SAP, and while they're the same platform, each SAP instance is rarely the same operationally or technically. So this means having separate inside SAP workflow tool instances to configure and support. Also, this inside SAP workflow tool will most likely not work with your other ERPs or require heavy customization, and this definitely complicates setting up shared services centers. Some key users in your invoice process may not have access to your SAP system, or you may simply not want to provide them access to SAP. And in many cases, it's actually faster and easier for these approvers to check and approve invoices through a web application, email, a mobile device, especially when they're working remotely or traveling. And additionally, the addition of SAP end user licenses is not cheap or free. Opening up your SAP system to an inside workflow tool presents unique and integration risks. Solutions that function inside SAP often require a major investment of time and money for this integration and maintenance by your SAP application engineers. Further, storing documents inside of SAP's blob storage negatively impacts SAP's database performance because SAP is optimized to manage data, not documents. And finally, even if workflow automation is enabled inside of SAP, this does not address one of the most important process automation opportunities, which is intelligent optical character recognition, or OCR, due to the artificial intelligence required for data extraction and validation. Even if workflow is inside, OCR recognition, extraction, and validation must still remain outside. And then you'll require multiple integrations and data interfaces from OCR, not only to your multiple ERPs, but also to your multiple workflow tools. So this is why many companies ultimately choose option 2, an outside SAP approach for automated AP workflow. This outside SAP approach provides a number of advantages. Simply, a single workflow tool can support multiple SAP instances and multiple legacy ERPs. This approach provides a more standardized process and controls for accounts payable departments and shared services. And regardless of the back-end ERP, a single workflow tool will provide a consistent and intuitive user experience for those approvers and remote and mobile workers, and keep them out of SAP and reduce your licensing costs for your ERP. By allowing your SAP environment and other ERPs to do what they do best, which is manage transactional data, you're now letting the workflow tool do what it does best, and that's manage transactional content. This approach provides a single database of workflow approval data, regardless of the ERP, which allows consolidated reporting and visibility to key business metrics. It also provides a faster and more flexible foundation to iteratively deploy and support automation to various ERPs or various geographic regions. Really, what we're talking about here is more than just the workflow tool. It's an enterprise content services platform that contains all of these components for managing transactional content and processes relating to the transactional data in SAP or your other ERPs. Specifically, this is the Hyland platform. OnBase is a single enterprise platform for the full range of capabilities, including capture and content management and process management, case management, reporting, and on and on and on. To be clear, OnBase is not a replacement for your SAP, and it's not a replacement for your ERP systems. Rather, OnBase is a complementary platform, allowing SAP to do what it does best and not having SAP do what it's not intended to do. As this complementary platform, OnBase extends content to SAP and other line of business applications as a single enterprise foundational layer throughout your organization. By allowing users to continue to interact with their structured data through their familiar user interfaces and applications, OnBase connects and manages the content and processes related to these business transactions. In fact, if you do any personal online banking and view your checks and statements online, the odds are you're already using OnBase and you just don't know it. It can be that intuitive and transparent because many of the bank processors use OnBase behind the scenes. So within your organization, by managing this content and these processes in OnBase, OnBase can now share this to your users across other business applications as well, such as legacy or custom ERPs, HR systems, contract management systems, mobile devices, email, customer portals, and even other workflow processes within the procure to pay lifecycle, such as procurement requests, GL coding, exception handling, when there isn't even a transaction yet in SAP. So if you take this outside SAP approach, then why should you consider Naviant and the Hyland OnBase platform? Simply, first off, we've been doing this for more than 30 years. This is what we absolutely specialize in and can bring these best practices to your organization. Second, and unique to the Hyland platform, it is entirely point and click configurable, including the certified SAP integration. So there is no need for custom development or scripting. Back to expertise, we have 22,000 customers in 80 plus locations throughout the world to draw upon when designing and supporting your solution. OnBase is consistently one of only a few tier 1 leaders as recognized by industry analysts, and I'll talk about this in a moment. And really important to recognize, the Hyland platform is not a point solution that can only be used for one function in one department at a time, like accounts payable. OnBase is this enterprise platform that is scalable throughout the organization, and it doesn't force you to change your processes to fit what a pre-configured shelf or point solutions process might be. And finally, as I've mentioned, OnBase is a certified SAP integrated platform, and Naviant is a certified partner. So I referred a moment ago that Hyland is one of only a few tier 1 leaders as recognized by industry analysts. This is the most current recent Gartner analyst rating for content services platforms. And while it's important, relative to a platform's ability to execute and deliver and support you in the future through completeness and vision of capabilities, more important than this tier 1 leader status on this chart, OnBase is the only leader that is one single platform with one single database and code set. Let me repeat that. OnBase is the only leader that is one single database and code set. This is so important because a solution with one single database and code set requires significantly less time for design and implementation and integration and support and training, including future upgrades and expansions. So there are so many capabilities in OnBase, but today we're going to focus and keep this focused on the common capabilities of AP automation. This is a high-level example, and we'll drill into this further in a moment, but this is a high-level example of a fully optimized SAP integrated accounts payable solution. With this option, invoices can be captured through a number of means, a vendor portal, scanning of paper, electronically ingested from email. But once in OnBase, the OnBase workflow tool and OCR take over to extract, validate, manage that data, pair it back to the SAP transaction, and if all information matches and is within your business rules, OnBase will post that transaction directly to SAP without any human intervention. For invoices that require reviews and approvals, such as non-PO invoice coding or PO exceptions, OnBase can also interact with your end users wherever they work best, through the web, email, mobile devices, or even the SAP business workplace. Essentially, this approach is the best tool for the best purpose. By complementing SAP's ability to manage transactional data, which it should, like vendor details, procurement payments, reconciliations, the Hyland platform provides certified content capture, extraction, validation, intelligent OCR, content workflow process management, including data synchronization and posting back to SAP. So looking at these components individually for AP automation more closely, we're now going to dive into each of these 4 high-level categories, and I am going to transition this to Guy.
All right, well, thank you, Ed. Well, as Ed had mentioned, there are so many different components to this and so many different ways that the workflow can be handled, but the fact is, as you're initially receiving the invoices coming from your different vendors, we need to capture them initially into the system. And here's just a going just a little too fast for myself. Here's a high-level graphic effectively showing you, how we have the ability of not only capturing paper, even if we're capturing paper, we still need to scan that. I know many organizations still receive a good percentage of their invoices still coming in via the US Postal Service. Those need to be scanned, but effectively, just to cover that ever so quickly, there's not a need to scan that separately, each individual document. There's different methodologies where you can batch those together, scan those as a single batch that you've accumulated over the last few hours or the entire day, and the technology has the capability of reading those invoices and separating one invoice from the next. But when you're receiving more and more invoices coming in via that email, what OnBase has the capability of doing is monitoring a specific email inbox, invoices@yourdomainname.com. As an invoice comes in based upon the rules that we configure, we're able to automatically bring that in not only the invoice, but potentially the email, any of the other attachments, and keep them all together because there might be some pertinent information associated with the invoice that's going to be necessary to make appropriate decisions throughout the process. But as that's brought into the system, we're also able to capture who did that email come from. So think of anything that you're able to see in the email message, date, time, subject, who it was from, so on and so forth. That can all be brought in and be utilized with any decision making. Another option that we do see some usage of is to configure a vendor portal, allow them to upload invoices to the portal. And what this really allows a user to do is to assign their different individuals that might be responsible for uploading those invoices to create an account, and given you have the capability of seeing these requests as they come in, granting them appropriate permissions, only being able to upload invoices specific to their organization. Or on the flip side, as we show this next screen, as we can retrieve some of their invoices, they're only seeing what has actually been submitted. So this is just another option to allow the users to get those invoices to you, and even allowing them to provide some indexing information such as the PO number that that's related to. Regardless of how we're capturing that invoice, we are then going to be utilizing some intelligent optical character recognition, OCR, to be able to read those invoices. And while Naviant supports multiple different OCR packages, as it relates specifically to SAP, Brainware is the platform by Hyland Software that has a very tight integration built with SAP, and that's usually our recommendation talking the world of OCR. So as those invoices come on in, really what's happening is that the system, once those are captured, optical character recognition is kicking in, creating a text rendition of that invoice, but we're doing much more than that. We're able to classify an invoice differently from a credit memo, different from potentially a purchase order or some other supplemental documentation that comes along with it. But then once we've identified what type of document has been captured, the system is able to then extract the appropriate information that's going to be necessary for posting those transactions into your ERP system, SAP in our example, which helps us to eliminate a lot of that manual data entry. And that's where we're really seeing the efficiencies of the system. Now we have this discrete data, but we're doing much more than that. We have to ensure that that data is now going to be compatible with SAP. Is this for a vendor that we recognize? Are these line items that match up with what was on the purchase order? Are all the dates valid? Did I get an invoice from 2 years ago, or was this a duplicate invoice for whatever reason? That's where we're actually doing some of this validation. And frankly, optical character recognition still is not perfect. If any vendor tells you that, oh, we see 100% extraction rates, well, I can tell you right now, they're probably not being truthful. Some percentage of those invoices need to now go to a verifier. That's going to be a human that's now going to be looking at just those invoices that the system has flagged saying, I'm not completely confident that I've extracted the appropriate information from each of these different discrete data elements. But that's really the high level overview of this. And then we export those documents as well as the data that's been extracted into OnBase from workflow processing perspective. So here's just a quick example of what Brainware looks like. And this happens to be an invoice that was perfectly read by the system. You can see the invoice on the right side, and the left side are all the different data elements that we've instructed the system to say we need to capture because this is used for posting and or any workflow processing. Frankly, nobody would actually see this invoice because it was read perfectly. The system is able to vote, and based upon our validation rules, we're sure that we capture this information accordingly. This next one just happens to be an invoice now that there was something wrong. And you can, calling your attention to the bottom of the screen here, it tells us that the purchase order does not exist. So we're not only just extracting this information. If I look at this number versus what's actually on the invoice, that's exactly what we found. But because of some problem, could be somebody fat fingering this from the vendor's perspective, they might have keyed this to an incorrect PO number. That's an issue now for us to be able to now match that information and post that properly to SAP. So a human has to actually correct this, but in this particular case, we flagged this, that this is a missing or an invalid PO. We're going to handle those exceptions downstream within the workflow, not right here. Another example is this next invoice that's popping up here, where we did not properly recognize who the vendor was. Now, since oftentimes the vendor information is included within a graphic, a logo, something like that, we're not only looking at what we can OCR, we're looking at any address block information, any domain names, email addresses, phone numbers, fax numbers, so on and so forth, and looking at your vendor master to be able to determine who the appropriate vendor might be based upon the closest match. In this case, it said, you know what, I found somebody on Collection Center Drive, the same as what I saw on the invoice, but it's not dice.com. So again, we've now flagged this as a vendor not found. That's going to be handed off to workflow, where now we can go ahead and route that accordingly to the appropriate queue so that somebody can go ahead and rectify that situation. Ed's now going to jump and talk about process management.
Thanks, Guy. So once this invoice image is captured and the data is extracted and validated, it needs to be processed. An OnBase workflow provides a highly configurable, robust process management engine for routing, review, escalations based on your business rules. Workflow provides this predictability and business process control. When content enters workflow, data elements and rules can evaluate and automate processing decisions. For example, non-PO invoices and PO exceptions can be sent to business users to review, validate, enter GL coding, manage exception processing, and more. Timers and reminders can also be used to assure that work remains visible and is done on time. Here is an example of an AP clerk's user experience. The invoice review life cycle is highlighted on the top left. The inbox on the middle left displays the AP clerk's work queue. Any related items to this invoice are displayed on the bottom left, and the invoice, obviously, the image is displayed on the right. Now, depending on the action required or permitted, that AP clerk's task options are located immediately above the image in the ribbon bar, such as, in this case, edit or view the distribution, submit for approval, reject, exception management, all of those next steps. End users, however, today have an expectation for solutions and processes with minimal training, the ability to work from anywhere, provide an intuitive experience, essentially meet them wherever they are. So since your day-to-day managers and executives are likely casual users of an invoice review process, OnBase can conveniently satisfy their expectations by integrating directly into their Outlook ribbon bar. OnBase can automatically send an email alert to that reviewer that there is something for them to do, and then after opening that email, the user will be presented with instructions. But more importantly, OnBase can provide their workflow tasks and access to that image directly from within the email message. The button on the bottom right can provide access to the image stored in OnBase, including any related documents. And then the reviewer can approve or reject that invoice, and OnBase can even prompt the reviewer to complete any required GL coding or exception clearing prior to any further approvals or finalization processing back to Accounts Payable. Another option is OnBase Mobile, which is available for Android or iPhone or iPad. The OnBase mobile app provides access to a range of enterprise content and processes for your mobile staff specific to AP workflow. Users can view their work queues, they can view the transaction data, they can view invoice documents and related documents, they can review and enter GL coding or exception information, and they can execute their tasks. So now let's shift for a moment to integration. As I mentioned, OnBase is an SAP-certified partner, and while this webinar is focused on SAP, again, please recognize that the process principles are absolutely applicable to other non-SAP ERP systems as well. OnBase has certified, purpose-built integration modules for SAP and other ERPs such as Oracle, PeopleSoft, Workday, Infor, Dynamics, and more. OnBase also has non-programmatic options, including a module called Application Enabler, which can integrate to almost any other ERP solution. These integration options include the ability to retrieve documents, store documents, create forms, initiate workflows, create correspondence, update and sync index values, and even automatically post transactions with the data that has been accumulated after workflow processing. So in addition to our extensive experience in certified integrations with SAP, the odds are we have probably worked with your other ERP systems and accounting systems before. Guy is actually going to provide a show and tell with the SAP integrations in a few minutes, so I'm going to hold off talking more about that until that time. And then finally, you can't manage what you don't measure. So OnBase has various reporting options. Reporting dashboards that you see here provide visibility to system and business process health. Data can be accumulated from OnBase, but more importantly from SAP or your other legacy ERPs as well into the OnBase dashboards to provide a consolidated enterprise process view. So these can be presented in a variety of graphical formats, including charts and graphs and scorecards, gauges, maps. These graphs are dynamic, they're interactive. The documents and data can be quickly accessed by clicking on the graph component and the related data components. This is another example of some dashboards that are used to monitor average workflow process times in various stages by clerks or departments, or workflow performance by AP processors. So now, as promised, it is time for show and tell with Guy.
All right. Well, the last piece to this is now to take all of that information, the transaction, the additional GL coding that might have been provided for non-POs from a department head, and that is actually pushed through that integration directly into SAP. So there's a handshake, and frankly, it's hard to demonstrate because that happens automatically behind the scenes. But now on the flip side of things, if you're working within SAP and you are querying for a Miro transaction, you can see that we can just natively go through SAP to go ahead and pull up that transaction detail. But what we actually do is we can go ahead and use the attachment control button to effectively now attach the OnBase stored document directly to this SAP object. So when I click on that PO invoice Miro, what that's actually doing is now reaching back into OnBase based upon the synchronized data. We've built a link between the OnBase stored document and that SAP transaction, so that just through that simple button click, mouse click, we're able to retrieve that document as it sits inside of OnBase. But beyond that, we have complete capabilities of OnBase here. Here you can see, here's the metadata that OnBase is stored, because we will actually synchronize the data that's coming from SAP. So if for whatever reason we update that transaction in SAP, we'll actually send that information back to OnBase so that all of that information is now updated. You can see that SAP invoice number here on the screen. That's effectively how we're now linking the transaction back to the OnBase doc. And again, if you're familiar with OnBase, all of the OnBase capabilities available to us directly from this image here. So it's a view of the doc. Convert, taking a look at something like 60. Again, I can navigate through my native inside of SAP. Same attachment control list I have available to us to go ahead and display that document. So here we can see the attachment list that's popping up. That, again, similar thing, I can go ahead and retrieve that document and pop that on up. Now, not only do we have the document available to us, any notes that are associated with it, you can see here, and we even have that entire document history, what happened inside of OnBase. So this is all the different workflow queues that this document has gone through, so we know exactly who approved this, when did each different individual interact with this document as we went through the process, so on and so forth. And finally, there might be some situations where if there's issues with an invoice, you can't post it for whatever reason. Some organizations to send that into the SAP business workplace. Just by clicking on this, you can see I have an invoice for FBD. We can image and allow the user to rectify whatever issue might be direct in SAP from that business. Again, with that string linked directly to that's stored inside. This is not stored with SAP. We're just linking. And just to show you more from the OnBase, how do we get that transaction into OnBase? A screenshot before flow looks like. Here's for example, after we maybe route a non-PO invoice to a user, they can go ahead and cut this particular queue, and we have the difference that can be with it. It's going to be approving the invoice for an PO. We're going to have to provide some mechanism to allow to enter the GL codation. So this is one of the ways that provided so that the transaction balances before we actively come in here and then finish the process by saying approve it, which transaction drove into SAP, and that whole is still main. Ed, back.
Thanks, Guy. Before we leave you today and wrap this up, I just want to spend a quick moment and share a few important resources if you want to learn more. Naviant has a new, recently designed website. We have a wealth of information on many solutions, including accounts payable, customer spotlights, videos, case studies, white papers, including dedicated best practice information on SAP content management, our focus for today. Within there is key SAP integration features and functionalities and SAP AP automation case studies.